Are you looking for affordable office space in Marion? The professional building located at 685 Delaware Avenue is the place for you. For more information, call 740-383-6803. Office space is now available. Again, telephone number 740-383-6803. This is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to Scott Spears Now. Tonight, a guest I like a whole lot. Comedian, actress, voiceover artist, really a pioneer in the world of voiceovers, Pat Carroll. She's worked with everybody under the sun and became famous in later years playing the voice of Ursula in Disney's The Little Mermaid. Pat is one of the nicest people you ever want to run into, so I want to get right to the interview. The gracious, the lovely, the beautiful, the talented, the legendary Pat Carroll. This is Scott Spears, and today we're joined by one of the all-time great character actresses, Emmy and Grammy Award winner Pat Carroll. From Make Room for Daddy to a long list of game shows to voicing the evil Ursula in Disney's The Little Mermaid, she has entertained us for many years and is truly a kind woman. It is so great to see and be joined by the legendary Pat Carroll. Pat, and I do want to wish you a happy belated birthday, Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo, Senor Spears. And I have to tell you, the first thing I thought of when I woke up on my 86th birthday was, only 4 more years and I'll be 90.
I think you're going to...
Please God, from my mouth to your ears. But that was it, because 86 sounds very Republican and dull, doesn't it? 86. Well,
I wasn't going to mention the age, Pat, because a lot of actresses don't like that, but...
Oh, well, they're full of baloney. I'm proud of every year. No one should ever be ashamed to say their age, because it proves you've been here and you've got all the experience that the years have given you, and you're still alive. Well, you know, I think of that and I say every day, thank you, Lord. That's it. That's it.
Well, you don't look 86 at all, Pat.
I look more like 89.
No.
Well, I feel wonderful, and I'm very grateful for that, Scott. And I probably aged you 5 years tonight with all of this computer and Skype jazz. I apologize for my lack of electronics brilliance, but I came late to this field. And I have to tell you, my 13-year-old granddaughter does better than I do.
You're doing wonderful, Pat. But I did want to ask you about 86. Is it harder to get roles? I hear a lot of older actresses complaining about over the age of 60.
Yes, it's very difficult, more so here in the United States than in England. If you note those magnificent actresses in England, they're all well over 70 at this time. But the important thing is that people write for that age group. In this country, we do not write to that age group, because the people who head the entertainment industry think people only want to see young people. Good luck to you, because the young people are aging every day, so you just have to keep bringing up young people. I think it is a lack of... Don't forget, actors don't create, we interpret. And if there's no material for us to interpret, you don't work. And that comes from the heads of the networks, the studios, and they think they have the pulse of America all glommed, and that's it. But I think the English actresses far supersede us because they work all the time. But the English train their actors in a different way. They go through drama school first, then they go into rep, which is like our old summer stock. It's a new role every week. You're rehearsing in the daytime while you're playing a different role at night. You have to learn with that kind of training, Scott. You just can't miss. And then they go out of rep and they're ready to appear on the East End in London and to work in films because they have the experience. We don't give our young actors in this country that chance to get experience first. You know, and I feel very bad for these youngsters who are starting out and want to learn, and they don't have the opportunity to do so today.
You know, Pat, what's your read on this idea that only people who are 35 will watch people who are 35? That's the craziest thing.
I think that's a lot of baloney. Look at all of the people who watched The King Speaks. Don't tell me they were all 35. Come on. Look at all the people who watch The Little Mermaid. They're not all 35. They go from 4 to 104. You know, I think it's a wrong theory. I don't think you can make something to fit an age scale.
I think you're right. I think I'm more leaning toward your way. Pat, I want to start back in your childhood here because I've never really heard you talk too much about it. Where'd you grow up and what was it like?
I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. Then my parents moved to El Paso, Texas, and I thought on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, which is my birthday, I thought the Muy Fiesta was for me. I thought they were all celebrating for my birthday. And if I'm in Los Angeles to this day, I go down to Alvera Street to be part of the fiesta and have lots of blue margaritas at La Golondrina. But I loved being a kid in El Paso in the Depression because all of the U.S. citizens crossed the footpaths and the bridges at night to go to Juarez because there was no prohibition there. And that's where I first began entertaining. I loved to sing, and I had a big pottery pig, and my parents' friends, most of them owned bars or restaurants in those days, when Americans could own that sort of thing in Mexican territory. And I loved getting behind the bars and drying dishes. So if I did that, then they would let me sit up on the bar and I'd sing my big hit song, which was When It's Springtime in the Rockies. And people in those days, you know, had silver dollars, and they would put those in my little piggy. And when my mama finally opened it for me, there was $500 in there.
Really?
So I said, drinks for everybody. But growing up in two cultures is a wonderful thing for a kid. I think I spoke Spanish before I spoke English because we had a wonderful, darling Mexican girl, dear darling Maria, who was about 18 years old, and she took me to my first theatrical experience, which was a Mexican vaudeville house. And we sat in a box and we watched all of the people entertain, and then all of a sudden the lights went down and a trumpet player stood up in the orchestra pit. A spotlight hit him and he played something brilliantly. I wanted to be in that spotlight. I think that was my first sense of what theatricality is. It was that very special sense of being in a light. And so I always treasure that Mexican vaudeville house because that was my first intimation of what that was. I wanted to do that. I didn't want to play a horn, though I later played a bugle in the Girl Scouts, but I wanted that marvelous thing of a light shining on you. And oh, he was a good trumpet player. But my mom and dad moved to LA when I was 5 years old in 1933. And that was wonderful because LA at that time was like a little country town. It was very laid back, very simple. There was certainly not the traffic there is today. It was wonderful growing up, and the weather was fantastic. I remember playing outdoors 365 days a year. And even with the rain, they were always what the Irish called soft rain. It was always, you were able to be outdoors and not get inundated with the water from the skies. I spent my educational years there. I went to Catholic school, starting in the grammar grades up through Immaculate Heart High School in Hollywood, Immaculate Heart College in Hollywood. And I must say, my memories of growing up in California were just marvelous. And I still have friends in my life from my first grade, from high school, more so than college. But all of my memories of that are so peaceful and so dear, and it's also where I fell in love with the theater. I was a library kid. My mother had taken me to the library when I was very young. I adored it. One of the happiest days of my life was the day I knew I was reading. I picked up a book and I said the words that were there, and I knew I was reading. I tell you, I have never forgotten the feeling of that, and I've been reading ever since. I think it's one of the most important gifts that educators or parents give to children, the ability to read their language, be it English or Hungarian or whatever it is. For a child to be able to pick up a book and read is one of the miracles of the world. And it lasts you your entire life, Scott. It never leaves you. I came back from 4 weeks in Florida, and what did I have? About 4 tons of books. I went to library book sales there and found volumes I didn't have. I bought at those library sales like there was no tomorrow. I will never live long enough to read everything I want to read. It is the most exquisite gift that we are given as children. I do believe that. I don't know if people agree with me, but it was certainly the best gift I ever had.
You know, Pat, when we talked about setting up this interview, you told me that you do have a Kindle. Do you still like to have the book in your hand, though?
Oh, I've got the Kindle I use when I travel, because I usually read rather thick books that are tough to sit on an airplane seat and handle. So my kids gave me a Kindle a few years back for a birthday, and I have used it exclusively on the airplanes because it's so easy to use. It's so simple, and I can have 3 or 4 or 5 books in there and switch from one to the other, because I usually read 3 or 4 books at a time. And so the Kindle has been just wonderful for me. I'm so thrilled that I have one. But I want to touch the pages. I want to smell the print. I want to feel everything physically that has to do with that book. It's very interesting. Some books have no personality at all, and I think it has to do with the print and the quality of the paper.
It's very interesting. I feel that way about newspapers.
I don't read newspapers, Scott, so I haven't read a newspaper in almost 70 years.
Really?
Yeah, I used to read 8 New York newspapers when they had 8 newspapers a day, until one story I was following was 8 different stories. Where was the journalism? I finished with that, and I said I'll never read a newspaper again, and I haven't.
I can understand that. Pat, I want to ask you about acting. What is it about being other people?
Oh, Scott, you're very dear. I don't think I've ever been another person. But the joy of acting, I think, and you may find many actors who disagree with me, is the joy of being able to do the physical work. To learn the words, which, and I did a one-woman show where I stood on a stage for 2 hours and talked. Once you have the words and you have done it, and you continue to do it, you begin to treasure those words. And it's the greatest joy in the world. But I have never been another person. You put on external things, you put on a walk, or you put on a dialect, or you change your face, or whatever you want to do. And your innards are involved, and you try to come as close to that character as you can. But you never really become another person. We are interpreters. We're not creative people. We are interpreters, as also are the great musicians of the world. They don't compose the music that they play so magnificently, and we don't compose the words that we hope we say well. I just think acting is full of the joy of speech and the craft of acting. And the craft is as hard for an actor to learn as it is for a musician. And it takes constant discipline, constant work, and constant concentration. It's wonderful, Scott. We are so fortunate to be able to do this work because you never know it all.
Do you ever see the day when you would want to retire from acting?
I don't know. I am not acting that much now. I can't work in the theater anymore, which is the love of my life, was when I first began, because I can't do 8 shows a week. I don't have the energy or the stamina for that, and I will not cheat people who have paid an admission. So I don't work in the theater anymore, and that breaks my heart, but that's the way of life, and that's fine. So I find other things like voiceovers, Am I the most fortunate actress in the world to have done that character of Ursula in The Little Mermaid?
Oh, what a character.
We don't get the opportunity, for the most part, to get those over-the-moon characters. Do you know what a joy it is to work at a character like that, Scott? It's a gift. I have never had such enjoyment in life, except for my one-woman show, than with that character.
Really?
That's the truth. And I'm still getting fan mail from children around the world. This week it was Taiwan. And someplace that from, I thought they would have dubbed in somebody else's voice. Why are they sending me for picture? You know, I don't understand that, but I accept it happily. And I am delighted and thrilled to write them back or send a picture, whatever they want. Because I've had such pleasure in doing the character, and I'm thrilled if they enjoy it.
How did you get that character, Pat?
Well, I do know that another actress, I auditioned 3 times for it, and another actress got it. But for some reason, they let her go, and I guess I was second on the list. Wasn't I lucky? I'm sorry for the previous actress, but I am just so grateful I was the lucky Pierre number 2. Mm-hmm. And there I was. So it really was a gift indeed. And the Disney people have just been extraordinary to me over these years. They're a wonderful company to work for, Scott. Just a wonderful company.
To you, Pat, who is Ursula?
I'm going to tell you what I used in my head as a guideline for what I think Ursula, or who I think she is. She is an ex-Shakespearean actress who sells used cars. Is that wonderful? And you remember what I told you, and if you ever see it again, check me and see if I'm wrong about that.
That's a perfect description.
It is, because listen to her speech, listen to the, and she's just over the mountain. Come on, lady. But she sells used cars.
I love that. Pat, what was the first role when you walked down the street and people said, that's Pat Carroll?
Oh, what a good question, Scott. I can't think now. It probably would be something from television. Because so many times people in a theater, unless they're top stars, do not get that recognition. But I think I began getting it with the first television show I did in New York, which was the Red Button Show. And the taxi cab drivers would lean on the window and say, hey, Pat, I saw your show last week. It was great. So, there you go. I was only doing the words that they wrote. So again, I'm an interpreter. I'm not a creator.
For those of us who have no idea what that's like, what is that like when people perceive to know you and you've never met them? What's fame like?
I have to tell you something. A very dear older lady came up to me in a restaurant and said, are you who I think I am? Now think about that. I may be using that as the title of my memoirs, which I'm working on now. But I think the joy of recognition for anything, can it be sports? Can it be music? Whatever it is approval. And we're all human beings. We love approval. And I see a lot of children who aren't getting enough approval. And that just breaks my heart, because approval is the thing we must give all children, whether they're your own or somebody else's, whether they're kids you don't even know or cousins of your granddaughters. Kids need approval. That's what makes them grow better. So think about it with your own kids or any kid that you meet. All the children of the world belong to all of us. They're our future. So give approval to every child you meet. They'll love it.
Do you like reality television?
No, I hate it.
What does that say about us that people are watching this?
I think people are very hungry for their own lives. That kind of television, I think, is potentially the greatest miracle of communication in the electronics field. But we have distorted and defamed it. And I watch one thing on television now, TCM. and it's all old movies. All of this reality garbage, and except for sports, you know, for people who adore sports, I think television does a magnificent job. Years ago, remember Eric Sevareid, that marvelous newsman?
Oh, yes, I do.
Well, he spoke at one of the Emmy presentations, and I've never forgotten what Mr. Sevareid said. He was lauding television, and he said, and television has done this, and television has done that, and television has done this, but television has never inspired. Oh my goodness, it gave me goosebumps that night, and it gives me goosebumps when I think about it, because television could inspire. But you have to have creative people who think in inspirational ways. And inspirational isn't religious, and it isn't goody-goody two-shoes programs all the time. No, I think the people who create better look up the word inspirational in the dictionary. And I don't spend that much time watching television because I made a vow when I was 10 years old that I would not be bored in my lifetime, and I never have been, so I don't watch television.
I understand. Pat, you've worked with so many wonderful people. I was looking at...
Haven't I been fortunate, Scott?
Well, there's no way we could ever cover them all, but I'm going to I'm going to shoot a name out to you, and I want you to give me a quick tin-type synopsis of that person. Danny Thomas.
Oh, Danny Thomas. Now, I was thinking about Danny yesterday. You know, that man left a legacy behind him, not only theatrical, but when he was an out-of-work entertainer in Chicago and he had a family to support. And this is the story we all heard. He went into a church and prayed to God and said, if you'll help me support my family, I will do something wonderful in your name. So years later, after all the success, he built a hospital, and there it is. And his daughter is now continuing to work for that wonderful hospital. And I think there isn't a child in this country, or maybe in the world, who, if there is a financial problem they can't pay, they still can go there and they're going to be taken care of. You know, that was Danny's dream. And from the time he retired until he died, he traveled thousands of miles raising money for St. Jude's Hospital. And it was St. Jude, he prayed 2 seconds, and he said, boy, if you're the saint of the hopeless, I'm one of your big advocates here. Because he was totally despairing. But he came out of that, he became a headliner in nightclubs. And I have to tell you, when I worked for Danny, he said to me one time, he said, Pat, you've never seen me work in a room, have you? I said, no, Danny, I haven't, because I don't go much to nightclubs, you know. My husband and I we don't go to nightclubs. He said, I'm playing Vegas. Would you and me come to see me in Vegas? I said, I would love to, Danny. I would love to. We were his guests. And I want to tell you something about that gifted man. He was one of the great entertainers because he would come out on the floor, and suddenly, all of these private individuals were his friends. He would tell you a sad story, and he would tell you a funny story, and then he'd tell you a real-life story. He was a raconteur par excellence. He was a man who sensed audiences because he dug human beings. He knew how human beings were put together. He was a marvelous boss to work for. He and Sheldon Leonard produced not only the Danny Thomas show, but the Dick Van Dyke show. We filmed next door to each other. And I would go to them and I'd say, gentlemen, I have had an offer to do 3 weeks of game shows in New York. Would you give me the time off? They'd say, when do you want to go? When do you want to come back? Now that is so generous and so thoughtful. I was so grateful for that. But anything they could do to help you, they would do. Danny was a person that could cry at the drop of a handkerchief because his heart was so soft. But he did so much good in his life, and that St. Jude's Hospital is his monument. He kept his promise. St. Jude is honored every time a child is helped in that hospital. I am very proud to have worked with Danny Thomas, and I think any of the performers that worked with him, I think, would feel the same way. He was fun to work with. When he'd direct a segment, I always called him Gadge. I'd say, "No, Gadge, what do you want?" Well, he would get so mad at me. "Get out of here with that, Gadge. What are you talking about?" He was just hysterical. He was he could blow his cork about things, and he could get angry about things, but it was usually justified. So I never scored him wrong for that. But he was kind to people. He warmed up his own audiences, which many stars do not do. So they were so ready to receive the rest of us performers when we came out because he had warmed them up so brilliantly. But that trip to Las Vegas, I suddenly knew the core of Danny Thomas's talent and his gifts, and he was indeed one of our best entertainers historically, I do believe. That's my opinion.
Sid Caesar.
Oh my golly, Sid Caesar was an anomaly. I had seen him on television because I worked in a place in the mountains in Poconos called Tamiment, where, who was the producer of the Caesar and Coca shows? Oh, God, well, I can't think of his name now, but it'll come to me. And he found Sid Caesar and Imogen Coca there, and he brought them into television. So I am watching all of these shows. I adored Coca, and I thought Sid Caesar was absolutely brilliant. He could do any dialect in the world. My husband happened to be Armenian, and one night we'd go out with Sid, as the whole cast would, every night we did a show. And I said, "Sid, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you do an Armenian dialect?" And he looked at me so puzzled, and he said, "He's Armenian. He doesn't have an accent." I said, "No, but he can do one for you, an Armenian." And my husband did a little Armenian character called, what was his name? It was a wild name. And he talked for about 2 minutes, and he stopped, and Sid looked at him and began talking to him in exactly the same dialect.
Wow.
His ear was impeccable. He was a musician. He played saxophone, and he had that music in his head. He could do any accent, dialect in the world. He was amazing. I used to sit in rehearsals and watch Sid Caesar, Howie Morris, and who's the third one?
Carl Reiner.
Carl Reiner. Oh, Carl will kill me. But I would watch those three men work, and I would think it's Tinkers, Everest, and Chance. Those men covered each other, and many times they'd come off a dress rehearsal and say, "Sketch isn't working." They would go in their dressing rooms with the writers, and they'd come out with a brand new sketch, which they would improvise on air.
Tremendous.
Going across the country. We did 2 shows, one for the West Coast, one for the East Coast. And those men would improvise a sketch that was hysterical. Oh, I think their gifts were fantastic. And Howard and Carl were the perfect men to be working with Sid because they supported him like geniuses. And if you ever watch any of those old tapes, you'll see their work. You'll see how wonderful they were with that man. He was marvelous by himself. But when you're doing sketches, you aren't working by yourself. And the three of them together were just superb. Superb. And you know, I must say, I had signed for the show, but I was pregnant. And I went to the hospital and had my first child, my son Sean, and I missed the first Sid Caesar show. And he came out after the show and he said, "Pat, Carroll could not be with us tonight because she had a baby." Well, the audience got hysterical. They just screamed with laughter. I didn't think it was very funny. But Sid got flustered. He said, "No, I mean it. I'm serious. She can't be with us for another week or 2. So that was my Sean's intro to the vast audience of America. But Sid was the kind of person that you'd see him puzzle about something, but he always came up with an answer. And everything was inside him. He was not a voluble person, personally. But he was always looking and thinking and figuring things, but very bright, very bright. And he had a tremendous sense of theatricality, you know. He was a wonderful boss, he and Sheldon Leonard.
Jimmy...
not Sheldon Leonard. I forget the producer on the Sid Caesar show now. I'm 86, you know, Scott. I can be forgiven a little lapse in memory now and then. I forget the producer's name, forgive me. But the two of them worked cheek on jowl, And it was a very happy group, I think. I was totally happy there. I loved the performance I was working with. I watched Sid and studied it. Oh, and I did one dreadful thing. Oh, my God. We had a sketch in which I played a little waitress in a restaurant. And the manager had told me if I made one more mistake, I was going to be fired. And so when Sid came in, you could kind of tell I was a nervous wreck. And he didn't say anything. He was trying to be nice. He was trying to be a nice guy. Well, I took his order, and I made a mistake the first time, so I went back. And this time, I was so nervous, I came, and I was carrying everything on a big tray, and I hit him in the back of the head with the tray. Well, in rehearsals, we rehearsed it, so I knew exactly what to do so I wouldn't hurt him. On the air, I brought that tray in, and I hit him on the base of his skull. You could hear it. You could hear that tray connecting with his skull. He fell down between his legs, which he was supposed to do. And I stood there and said, oh, my God, I've killed Sid Caesar. Because he wasn't moving.
Oh.
His head was down. He wasn't moving. I have killed Sid Caesar. Now, what do? Do I walk off here and just leave him dead there? Do I wait until the police come? What do I do? And all of a sudden, I saw his shoulders shaking. I thought, oh, my God, he's alive! He's alive! Oh, when he got up, I hugged him. I just hugged him. And then, of course, he did 5 minutes on my nearly killing him.
That's a
got
great...
screams with it. And I went to him after. I said, Sid, I am so sorry. He said, you've given me a headache I won't recuperate from for 6 months. And then he began to laugh. I said, all I can do is apologize, Sid. If you want me to put a Band-Aid on your head for you, I'll do anything you want. But he was so gracious about that ghastly accident. It was just, and you could hear that crack of the skull all over the studio, and people went, and I thought, oh, God, I've killed him. I've just killed him. Sid Caesar is now dead right here.
What a great story that is.
Isn't that marvelous?
That's a great story. You know, Pat, it's so interesting. A lot of people know you from game shows.
Yeah, oh, I loved game. I couldn't do a game show today if my life depended.
Now, why is that?
I loved it. Oh, my golly, I loved the game shows.
Now,
I couldn't wait to go on. I had a very fast mind during that period of time, and I loved the competition, and I loved winning for people, and I lost for a few people, and they were always the ones I met, not the ones I won for, but the ones I lost for. And they were looking daggers at me, and I don't blame them, doggone it. But I loved those shows. I did all of them. Tom Kennedy's show, $25,000 Pyramid, To Tell the Truth, all of them. They were marvelous to do. I could not do them today, Scott. My mind just does not work that quickly.
I think you'd be okay, Pat. I
don't think so, Scott. I would be too scared to even try. Because I've missed 3 people's names already in talking to you tonight. Years ago, I wouldn't have missed a name. But you know what? I don't get upset about it. If my brain isn't functioning like it did when I was 30, that's life.
That's the way it goes.
That's right. That's right. And I've gained other things, so I can let go of the memory with a little blue ribbon around it. But I did love those game shows.
You know, Pat, I want to circle back to Ursula for just one reason. There's a question I wanted to ask. Where does her voice come from? Because it's not exactly your voice.
Well, I don't know if they fool with it electronically. I have no knowledge of that, Scott. But all I do is record my own voice like that. Life's full of tough choices, isn't it? You know, that kind of thing.
There it was. And that's what it's... Your voice does change a little bit. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, I bring it down about an octave. But they may do electronic things because they're... Incidentally, The Little Mermaid is being released in 2014 in 3D.
Amazing.
Is that fantastic?
It's been a wonderful ride with that. What a great ride.
Oh, I tell you, I'm just so grateful about it all the time. And you know, they put it away in the vault. If you go around after they've taken The Little Mermaid off the shelves and out of circulation, you can't find any Little Mermaid merchandise. They take everything away, and then in 7 years, they re-release it and bring everything out. Is that smart?
That's a smart idea. That's a great idea.
Well, they are the most brilliant business people. They are just superb. I trust them totally, and they're wonderful to work for.
You know, Pat, you've had this wonderful career. Do you have any regrets?
Not a single one, except I wish I could have sung in the opera. Oh my golly, not even an aspiration. I've been very fortunate, Scott, and I say my prayers of gratitude because I have had a long career, a very happy one that had loads of challenges in it, and I tried to meet all of them. I have no regrets about anything theatrical.
Is there still something you want to do in your career?
I'd like to play King Lear as Queen Lear.
There you go. Somebody should offer that to you.
But I don't think I could do it because I can't, as I told you, working with, I can't do 8 performances a week anymore. But if I had an ambition and I had the stamina, I would like to do Queen Lear. And I think there are aspects of it that would even be more interesting with a female in that character.
I think you're absolutely right. Pat, one thing I wanted to ask you, we did before we went on the air, where do you keep your Emmy and your Grammy?
Right here in my office.
Yeah.
I don't know if are you seeing me?
I can see you, but I can't see the Emmy. I see the Grammy.
Well, the Grammy is there, and the Emmy is just to the left of it. And above it, it's taller. My kids teased on that Emmy. Oh, there are a lot of good dents in that thing. And the Grammy was for my one-woman show about Gertrude Stein, which I played 18 months in New York and 4 years on the road. It was heaven. What can I tell you? It was just heaven. I never got bored with it. I never got tired of it. It was just everything I believed about acting was in that. Most people called it a monologue, which it was. It was a monologue. I thought of it as a play. And I have never had a better experience in my life.
Is that the highlight of the career, Pat?
I think so. I think it said everything I have to say about acting, about theatricality. And Gertrude Stein was not an easy character to do. In fact, I was so cocky when I was in college, I didn't like her writing. I thought I could write better than she could. You see, you're so cocky when you're 18, impossible. But the more I did research on her, the more I began to understand the brilliance of this woman and her writing. And she influenced Hemingway, Thornton Wilder, a number of major writers. Because of her repetition and succinctness, which was a style of hers, I think she influenced them very much. And it's only in my later years I've begun to understand some of her work. I'm a slow learner, Scott. What can I tell you?
Pat, I am told that you have a funny story about meeting Cary Grant.
Oh, my God. Now, I think Cary Grant was the personification of a movie star. I adored Clark Gable. He was my movie star from the time I was 6 years old until he passed away. May he rest in peace. But Cary Grant could do comedy, he could do drama, and he was always gorgeous. I mean, I would rush out to see anything Cary Grant was in. Well, I was rehearsing my first Broadway show. And, you wear rehearsal togs. I had on sweatpants and a sweatshirt. And I was working with the choreographer on a dance routine. And the stage manager came up out of the house and said, Mr. Golden would like to see you, Pat. And I said, fine. I said, just let me get a towel and wipe off a bit and I'll be right up. Which I did. Got a towel, wiped off the sweat, walked down the stairs. Now, you have a lot of lights, even in rehearsal, and the minute you step into the theater house, it's almost totally dark. In fact, the stage manager had my hand and was leading me. And we go back halfway into the house, and there's the producer, Ray Golden, and there's a gentleman sitting next to him, and there are a couple of other people there. And Ray said, Pat, thank you for coming down. I would like you to meet a very special guest of ours, Mr. Cary Grant. And I leaned over and I said, how do you do? And I'm Greta Garbo. La, 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 la. I saw his face. I thought, oh my God, it is Cary Grant. And I've just made an ass of the first water of myself. And he just looked at me and he said, I know exactly what you mean. Oh my God, how gauche I was. Oh, I'm embarrassed to even repeat the story, but I think it proves a surprise is waiting for you around every corner. Just be prepared if you can be. If not, relax and enjoy it.
That's a great story. Pat, I did a little bit of digging, and I've got some things here I'm going to ask you about. I did some heavy digging for this next thing. Now,
all right.
Now
okay, Scott. You know, I have no secrets.
Well, this is not my opinion as I read it, but I hear that you're a horrible cook, and
I'm not a cook. I'm not a cook, Scott.
That you made us.
Did one of my daughters tell you that?
Well, they said you made a stew.
I caught you. Tara told you. I have to tell you, I've never been a good cook. My mother was a businesswoman, and when I got married, she sent a cookbook to my husband with an apology on the flyleaf saying it was my fault that I did not teach her to cook. You better learn. And God bless him, he was Armenian. He could cook Armenian food. Oh, he was wonderful. But the one little story that proves that I do not cook, I had such good friends from when we worked in stock together. The fellas and the gals, we all stuck together like a team in New York. And it was wonderful because you had buds all the time. And I was rooming in a little single bachelorette apartment with 3 of my girlfriends from the stock company. Wonderful women. And they're all gone now. And I pray every day for their peace and their rest eternally. They were wonderful human beings. So one night, the girls, they were great cooks, all 3 of them. And one night they said, well, Pat, when's your turn to cook? And I wasn't going to tell them I couldn't cook. So I said, well, are the fellas coming over? We all dated, 4 guys, and we'd usually go out with them for dinners. So I said, well, invite the guys over this Friday night and I'll cook. Oh, Miss Cocky-Locky. And I'm not about to tell them that I don't cook. So I began to think, what could I cook? I know, baked beans. Baked beans, that's what I'll do. So the night the fellas came over, I had wonderful hors d'oeuvres. I had a wonderful bar set up for the gentlemen, and the hors d'oeuvres were fabulous. But time went by, and finally one of my roommates came here and said, Pat, I don't mean to pry, but I haven't seen anything being prepared for dinner. And I said, well, it's in the oven where it's supposed to be. She said, what are you cooking? I said, baked beans. She said, what? She said, would you mind opening the oven? I didn't see any beans soaking. I said, you don't soak baked beans. What's wrong with you? Sure, open up the oven. In the oven was a cookie pan with each bean set in it. Each bean. Needless to say, she called in the other gals and the fellas, and they fell about. They were screaming and hitting each other. My feelings were slightly hurt.
Now, that's a story.
Now, I gotta tell you though, the fellows were gentlemen. They took us out for dinner, and one of the girls later said, did you do that on purpose? And I said, no, I didn't. I don't know how to make baked beans.
Well, Pat, I think you know who my source is now, so I'll finish the thing on the cooking. You make a famous stew called Mom's Famous?
Yeah, and the whole family walks up.
What's in this?
That's my reputation, you see. When the kids were young, that was Carrie. Sean was the top fella. He died 2 years ago, God rest him. And Carrie was second, and little Tara was last. So when I would make the announcement that, the cook is off tomorrow night, so I'm going to make Mom's best. It was a stew I thought was wonderful. I could have eaten the whole pot of it myself, but my husband would immediately call for reservations. And the whole family would get up and hug him and say, thank you, Daddy, thank you, Daddy. So for years, it's been thrown in my face, oh, are you cooking Mom's best this week? And no, I'm not cooking for you people anymore. You have no sense of appreciation. I am a dreadful cook. I have never enjoyed being in the kitchen. So my idea of cooking dinner is reservations.
Well, Pat, I think you know who my source is now. And
There's my daughter, Tara.
I have one more, and I asked her if I could say this on the air, all these. And this one I was hesitant about, but we'll go ahead with it. She said that you got 2 speeding tickets in one day.
Oh my golly, yes, and my mother was in the car.
Oh my goodness.
Can you believe that? We were driving from Los Angeles to Carmel, where we had a second home, and I had a gorgeous Mercedes, that double convertible. Oh my golly, what a magnificent car! And so my foot got a little heavy on the pedal to the metal, and oh dear, that was outside Santa Barbara. So I stopped the car, and the officer was very polite, and he said, "Madam, do you know how fast you were going?" I said, "Officer, my mind was miles away." He said, "Well, this ticket isn't." And he handed me the ticket, and I didn't say anything to my mother. I wouldn't even look at her. So we're driving again, and we're getting closer to Carmel, and all of a sudden, and I turned to my mother, and I said, "If you say a word, I will put you out of this car, and you will walk to Carmel." Well, her lips were quivering from holding back the laughter, but the officer came, and I said, "Yes, officer, I know I was speeding. Please give me the ticket." He said, "I hope you have a lawyer." I blessed him for his sense of humor, but I got the ticket, and my mother was kind enough to burst out laughing instead of giving me a lecture.
Makes it a
But
little
I did have to take a lawyer downtown, though, to plead my case.
Oh gosh.
And the judge didn't take away my license, but he said, "I don't want you driving anything at all for the next month." And I said, "Not even my Jeep?" And he said, "Especially not your Jeep." My mother never forgot that. She never forgot it, and always brought it up. "Are we getting any more tickets recently, dear?" What a horrible example for my children. What a horrible example.
You know, Pat, those are great. That's funny. We've had a lot of fun in this interview, and this is the only time, and I don't want to become too maudlin about it, but you mentioned that you lost a son.
Yes.
How do you get through that?
Well, think of the millions of people who've lost children, who've lost mothers, who've lost... You get through it by thinking of them, by praying for them, and by remembering them at their best. And the fun that you had together, and some of the tough times you went through together. But it's remembering them for what was the best of them. Scott, I really think that's the truth. I pray for Sean every day. And Carrie, his older sister, said she can hear him laughing. And I said, "Oh, thank God he's having a ball in heaven. That's marvelous." But I sympathize with anybody who loses a child, because for a child to go before you do, I think is the toughest thing to take.
Can't imagine.
Yeah, it's just very, very tough, and my heart goes out to anybody. We all are sad when we lose parents or aunties, uncles, grandparents, but when you lose a child, it doesn't seem right.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't seem right. They aren't supposed to go before us. But I think the only thing we can do is remember them at their best. Remember the joyous times you had as a family. Remember the laughter. And then say good prayers for them, that they are happy and their energy is being used in another way in a different place.
Perfect. Pat, you know who my source was, your daughter, and in the spirit of Mother's Day coming up, they did want to pass along a message to you, your daughters. Your daughters think you are absolutely the best mother in the entire world and a hell of an actress to boot.
Oh my God, you're going to make me cry.
Well, that's, you know what, I could, as far as actress and a great lady, I'm right there with them.
Oh, well, God bless my daughters and God bless you. And I have a marvelous 13-year-old granddaughter, my oldest girl, Carrie, adopted. She is an angel. And this is not just a grandmother talking. I'm telling you, that child is blessed. And she brings joy and love into all of our lives and anyone she meets. And I am counting on her. Wow, my money is on her.
Pat, before I let you get out of here, you have lived the 20th century. Your lives have touched so many celebrity stars back when they really were celebrities and stars. Yeah. You've done so much, and you're not leaving us anytime soon, but 50 years from now, when the name Pat Carroll's brought up, how would you like people to remember you?
With laughter. I used to play tennis with that wonderful archbishop who was on the television. And he said to me one day while we were playing, he was a good tennis player. He said, Pat, I have to tell you something. You people who work in comedy do a great gift, because laughter is the finest thing that anyone can elicit, and you are blessed. And I thought, oh my Lord, is that the most marvelous thing to say? And do you know who his best friend was?
Who's that?
Milton Berle. And who was the first person at his funeral? Milton Berle. So he not only talked to philosophy, he lived it. And I think he was so right about that. I bless everybody in the world who brings laughter. And it doesn't have to be theatrical. You know, in every family, there's that person that everyone turns to that gives them a laugh. They're blessed too. Anybody who makes laughter, whether it's a parent with a child or who it is, keep the laughter going.
Well, Pat, I have to say that we have laughed a lot in this interview, and I truly, truly have enjoyed this. You are so kind, so wonderful, so... I'm absolutely effusive about you at this point. I'm so glad we got together. I'm so glad we could see you. You look great. I'm so glad you're doing great.
Thank you, Scott. I've been through a lot of garbagey stuff in the past few years, but you know what? Our medical people are so wonderful today, and they're very good to us older folks because they've done more study and work on us. And I am grateful to every medical person I've dealt with in the past 15 years. God bless them all.
And Pat, I hope you come back because, as I say, this has been a pleasure.
Anytime you want me to blab on, Scott. You know, when did we do a radio interview? How many years ago?
It was about 5 years ago.
You see, and look, you're on TV now, going around the world, 75 countries. Oh, you're doing okay, mister, and I'll tell you why. You're a good interviewer.
Well, coming from you, that means something, and not 5 years again.
All right, I promise I'll be available to you anytime. And now I know how to work Skype. Oh, that was my best laugh of the day, Scott. Thank you for your patience.
The brilliant, the wonderful, the amazing Pat Carroll. Thank you, Pat.
My pleasure, Scott. Bye.
Bye.
I want to thank Pat Carroll for coming on the program today. What can you say? She's one funny lady, and I love her laugh, and I love her voice. Thank you, Pat, for coming on. Until next time, this is Scott Spears, headed for the dugout.